This interview is going to be broadcast as the first session in the Australian Vet Conference. What are your opinion in all these, not only just the event, but all the different conferences that the vet sector is organizing, and will be your message to people that will participate in this conference for 2 days?
Yeah, I think conferences like this one are incredibly important. I go to a few of them in my capacity right now, and I get something out of all of them. I'm sorry I can't be physically present on the 12th and the 13th. I've got some parliamentary responsibilities that get in the way. But what really matters, I think, even in an increasingly digital connected world, is the possibilities that come from direct engagement. Building closer relationships, strengthening networks, finding ways to have shared understanding in a way that doesn't always happen through screens or other methods. I think now it's also a time for us to think about the journey that we're on in terms of the Australian vet sector. I like to think of the last term of Parliament, our first term of government, as a term of consolidation and rebuilding. Now, with that rebuild well in progress, it's a chance to think about what's next. The government obviously has plans, but obviously we want to be good at listening to the voices of the sector, the diversity across Australia, the diversity of providers, the diversity of students, to make sure that we are building a system that's fit for purpose and which is also consistent with our aspirations for that critical parity of esteem between those two tertiary pathways and making them connect much better to one another.
So with regard to the National Skills Agreement, it's been around 2 years since it's been signed. What milestones have been already achieved, and what is your assessment to date?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, and I might make two broad observations at the start and then go into the detail of your question. The first one is to reflect on how significant it was that my predecessor, Brendan O'Connor, was able to get all Australian jurisdictions together to sign a National Skills Agreement after pretty much a decade without one, without that coordinated and focused national effort on an area that's of enormous national importance, which shapes the lives of every Australian. So I don't think we should pass over that lightly. The second thing is that I'm very actively thinking now, as I work my way through the progress of the current agreement, to start thinking about what the next agreement will look like, informed by my appreciation of how the current one is working. And with that in mind, I think there are some really obvious markers. Through the agreement, we've now got in place a national TAFE network. A really significant step forward to a more joined up vet system, which of course in turn opens up some of the possibilities of a genuinely harmonised Australian tertiary education system. We now have 16 TAFE Centres of Excellence up and running. We've seen real progress in terms of the way in which our shared sense of national priorities have brought ministers from around the jurisdictions together. So I think we're making a real contribution through the mechanisms in the agreement and through, of course, some of the related mechanisms the government has in place. It's very pleasing to me to see Jobs and Skills Australia demonstrate that occupations in shortage are consistently coming down. That's got a lot to do with the focus the National Skills Agreement has enabled us to apply to this challenge.
That vision of having a 50-50 in the tertiary education, university, vet sector, and not having the vet sector as the pool cousin or the second option for students. What is your evaluation of that?
I think we're making real progress, and I see real interest in the idea of this parity of esteem between the sectors. I think there are some cultural questions that we've got to open up with the Australian community. And when I talk about a more even split, that's really what I'm trying to do, to reflect on how we can better shape people's choices when it comes to tertiary study, to the sort of opportunities that are out there in the labour market. Obviously, the progress towards the ATEC and the work that I do collaboratively with Minister Clare as Minister for Education is really important here. But it's also about the conversations that Australians are having around their dinner tables, with their children as families, or indeed in workplaces as people might think about retraining or upskilling. making sure that we send some really clear signals about the extraordinary value of vocational education and training, something that I'm really passionate about, as we also talk about the imperative of lifelong learning for all Australians.
Now, one of the issues that are being pointed out, and I think it has been around for decades, is the governance, the integrity, the compliance part. And it looks like we lived in a kind of like a continuous crisis. What is your evaluation about the changes in that regard with the introduction of the new standards, the 2025 standards, and ASQA? And when you reflect on that, I would like to think on, are we only trying to regulate RTOs, or should we, the time that we start thinking of regulating the system as a system, not just the training organisations?
Yeah, look, that's a really important question. On the new RTO standards, I've got to say I've been really pleased with how that has been progressing, the feedback that I've been receiving. In terms of the broader space, I think what I'd like to really focus on is the quality of training that's on offer in Australia, whether that's through TAFE, through enterprise, GTOs or private colleges, to really have the conversation about quality. But in saying that, that obviously rests on integrity. We have made some changes and put in place resources to enable ASQA to more effectively look into and deal with some unscrupulous operators. That work is ongoing and will be ongoing for some time. But I think we can't look away from the fundamental imperative of ensuring that Australians and indeed international students can see our VET system as providing really high quality and relevant education. That's the story that I want to get on with telling.
And the resources that ASQA has to deal with that, what is your assessment on that?
Well, we have made some very significant additional resource allocations, particularly to support initiatives like the tip-off line, which I think have been really critical in both uncovering some practices that needed to be brought to light, but also in building a deeper sense of public confidence in the system. So I'm pleased that we've been able to offer those additional resources. I won't speak on behalf of the CEO of ASQA about their sufficiency, but I think we can see those results in terms of the level of enforcement action that they've been able to undertake and the consequences that have followed from that.
Something that is close related to it, but more with the quality and not the compliance, is the relevance of the training packages. So Job and Skills Australia and the Job and Skill Councils, they got the job to create these training packages. Something that it doesn't look like it has happened yet is, and I would like your opinion on that, is closing the loop. So they create the training, RTOs will deliver, ASQA will do the compliance check, but how do we know that it's a return on investment on the content that we're delivering? Is that part of a job that you expect Job and Skill Australia to do?
Yeah, I mean, that really goes, in my mind, to the heart of putting in place our 10 Jobs and Skills Councils as tripartite and responsive bodies in this space. Obviously, they've got a big job to do in terms of maintaining the currency of training packages, but I think their role really goes deeper than that. And I think on any fair reading, and I know a number of JSC CEOs and other senior representatives will be engaged at the conference, I think what we are seeing is that deeper industry engagement, and that is leading to a sharper focus on relevance and currency of training packages and skill sets too, particularly as we look to how technology is rapidly changing the world of work.
Talking about technology, generative AI is impacting every single workplace. How can we better embed those digital literacy skills and particularly the use of AI into the training packages?
Yeah, that's something I think a lot about. And again, I think a slightly broader view is required. I'm conscious, of course, of the work being done across government in terms of AI, particularly that being led by Minister Ayres. But when I think about my responsibilities, I think about how critical it is that we think about foundation skills as encompassing not just digital literacy, but increasingly an awareness of artificial intelligence. That's about how people can be equipped for work, but also more broadly how they can use AI tools safely and confidently in their daily life too, as it's becoming a really big part of it. I'm guided, of course, by the work that Jobs and Skills Australia have done, and of course the big takeaway from their capacity study rather, is to think of AI as augmenting rather than replacing existing jobs. And for me, that goes to me trying to think about how artificial intelligence is impacting on tasks rather than jobs per se. And I'd like to think that that is how our Jobs and Skills Councils, and indeed employers, unions and others, are thinking about how can we better equip Australians in all walks of life to navigate this changing world of technology on their terms, particularly in terms of being able to effectively engage in the labour market, but also recognising the broad impact. And I guess the last point I'd make for me is I see enormous productivity potential in artificial intelligence, and I know I'm not alone in seeing that. But I think we will only harness the benefits of that for the Australian economy if we listen attentively to the experiences of those currently doing those jobs and bring that to bear in the evolution of training packages and other products through the JSCs.
If we can talk about TAFE and the balance, the funding that the government put into TAFE and other RTOs. Now, fee-free TAFE is being now around, and significant amount of money is being put into that area. What is your evaluation of the return on investment that taxpayers are getting on those courses? And I believe we invest around $3 billion.
When I think about, again, the National Skills Agreement on the one hand and free TAFE on the other, I think about the critical importance that was before us in returning to government of rebuilding TAFE, public TAFE, as a critical national asset that can, as part of the public system, deliver on national priorities in a really direct way once that reinvestment started to take root. And obviously in different states and territories, that process was at different stages. And I certainly make no apology. In fact, I'm very proud to be part of a government that's put TAFE at the very heart of VET. That's not to say that it's to be all of VET, and I'll come back to that in a moment. When I think about free TAFE though, I think Australians have voted with their feet or voted with their fingers on keyboards as appropriate. More than 725,000 enrolments as of the last statistics. That number will have grown. More than 210,000 courses completed. All courses that relate to areas where occupations are in shortage across the economy. So I think those numbers really speak for themselves at one level, but when you dig beneath the numbers, you get an even more powerful message. Obviously, you're seeing relatively an overrepresentation of, for example, First Nations Australians, Australians in regional communities getting access to really valuable training and important qualifications. And some of the stories I found deeply, deeply moving. People being reconnected to learning after a long time displaced from it. People finding confidence in themselves, a pathway through their engagement that simply would not have been possible but for free TAFE. So I feel we're getting a fantastic return on that investment, and I'm really pleased that the Parliament passed the bill last year to make free TAFE permanent at the national level. In terms of, I guess, the rest of the sector, well, there will always be room for innovation, whether it's particularly servicing thin markets, seeing other great products that are out there outside of that. I was at the National Indigenous Training Academy just on Friday night, thinking about how specialist providers can offer high quality training. I think there's room for multiple players in this space.
With that investment in TAFE, we got the TAFE Centres of Excellence. Is that what it will be the benchmark for all RTOs in Australia? Is that what one of the purpose of creating that?
I think when I think about the TAFE Centres of Excellence, what I think they are really doing is to combine two important concepts. One, the physical concentration of knowledge, of people, of partnerships to generate new course content and linkages to research, and then to enable them to be effectively diffused around the country. We're already seeing courses developed in some of these centres of excellence in areas like modern methods of housing construction, for example, that can be to the benefit of all Australians. So we're already starting to see the benefits of that through the centres of excellence and having that really focused work on areas of national interest that can be shared now nationally.
One last question, if I might. 15 years ago, when TEXA and ASQA were created by the Labor government, the long-term plan was to, at some point, merge them into one regulated. Is that still in the plan?
Well, at the moment, I'm focused on seeing ASQA continue to do its really significant work, and that obviously has changed in scope a little bit as we contemplate tertiary harmonisation. So that accreditation side of its work has changed significantly. My focus is on the here and now in that regard, but I understand it's a really important debate as we continue to step towards the full establishment of the ATEC and tertiary harmonisation more broadly.